Before a single etch gas flows into a chamber, before any light touches a wafer, a DRAM cell exists only as a file. A design file, formatted in a schema that Cadence wrote, sitting on a server that requires a license Cadence controls. Every Chinese memory chip that shipped last year passed through that file format. Everyone. The question this map answers is whether Beijing has found a door out of that room, or whether it has only found a window it cannot yet fit through. A breakthrough in chip design independence is not a faster tool or a prouder announcement. It is a rerouted line on the dependency map, a path from design intent to mask set that no longer passes through a node a foreign government can close. The network beneath the silicon is a graph of licenses and file formats and verified flows, and the choke points in that graph are not machines you can see. They are agreements that can be revoked by email. We are going to trace one DRAM cell's design file through that network, from schematic entry in a Cadence format library all the way to a Chinese fab's mask set. And we are going to read the map node by node. Some junctions are open. Some are under construction. One is not passable. That is what we are here to find out. The file is born at the design entry node. A chip architect describes what a memory bit cell must do, and that description is translated into a schematic, a structured diagram of transistors and connections that captures intent without yet specifying geometry. The tool doing that translation, in the overwhelming majority of advanced commercial flows, is made by Cadence or by Synopsys. But the tool is not actually the deepest choke point here. The deepest choke point is what the tool runs on, the process design kit. A process design kit is the handshake between the design world and the physical world. It is the fab's own specification of what its manufacturing process can do, expressed in file formats the electronic design automation vendors defined. Every transistor model, every layer definition, every electrical constraint is encoded in the kit and formatted to a schema Cadence and Synopsys created because they had enough installed base that every supplier formatted to them. CXMT, the HEFI-based DRAM producer that has achieved volume production at roughly 17 to 19 nanometer DRAM half-pitch by some analyst estimates, builds its process design kits against these formats. Not because of a mandate, because its engineers were trained on them, its library vendors supply files in them, and its downstream verification tools expect them. Think of the process design kit as a city building code. Not the crane, not the concrete, not the architect. But every blueprint in the city is drawn to its dimensions, and a crane built for a different code cannot lift those beams. Cadence and Synopsys did not write the building code by fiat. They wrote it by being the only firms with enough installed base that every supplier in the ecosystem formatted to them. That is a subtler kind of control than any machine embargo. And my read is that most coverage of electronic design automation export controls misses it entirely. The coverage treats the software as a proxy for the chip, as though restricting the tool is a way of restricting the device. My read is the opposite. The software restriction is a map restriction. What the United States controls is not the chip. It is the verified path from design intent to manufacturable geometry. That is a more durable choke point than any piece of hardware, because you can photograph a machine, but you cannot photograph 30 years of accumulated compatibility. Node, design entry and process design kit format. Status, sealed choke point, no confirmed bypass. Chinese fabs write their process design kits to Cadence and Synopsys interchange formats because the entire downstream tool chain, including domestic tools, still ingests those formats. A Chinese native schema would require every intellectual property vendor, every library supplier, and every verification tool to reformat simultaneously. That coordinated switch has not happened. The file has a schematic. Now it needs a body. The DRAM cell's logical description becomes a physical layout. Transistors placed on a die, wires routed between them, arrays tiled across the silicon surface. This is place and route, and at the leading edge, it is one of the most computationally intensive steps in the entire flow. The line from design intent to a routable layout passes through Synopsys IC compiler and Cadence Innovus for the overwhelming majority of advanced commercial tapeouts worldwide. Synopsys and Cadence together hold what multiple industry analysts estimate to be roughly 2/3 or more of global electronic design automation revenue, with physical design tools representing the highest value segment. For advanced DRAM, the memory array itself follows a relatively regular tiling pattern, but the periphery logic, the control circuits that surround the array and govern how it is read and written, runs through physical design flows that are substantially identical to logic chip flows. That periphery is where the algorithmic complexity lives. CXMT and YMTC both licensed Synopsys and Cadence tools through periods before tightened export controls. The extent to which those licenses have been curtailed or renewed is not fully public, but United States Commerce Department rule changes in 2022 and subsequent updates added electronic design automation tools to the restricted list for certain end users. Reports from industry observers suggest Chinese memory producers move to extend existing license agreements ahead of anticipated restrictions, stockpiling access in effect, the way a city might top up its water reservoir before a known dry season. Place and route at this scale is less like drafting and more like routing an entire city's road network from scratch simultaneously, with thousands of constraints on lane width and intersection clearance in hours rather than years. The algorithms that do this were refined across decades of academic and commercial iteration. You can teach the theory in a semester. You cannot replicate the tuned, silicon-verified implementation in a product cycle. Every time a design passes through these tools and reaches manufactured silicon, the tool's internal models get validated or corrected against reality. That is a feedback loop Synopsys and Cadence have been running for decades, and a new entrant starts it from zero. Node. Physical design. Place and route for advanced DRAM and periphery logic. Status. Choke point. With a bypass under construction, unverified at the leading edge. Empyrean Technology, listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange and the most capitalized domestic electronic design automation firm by a significant margin, has disclosed wins in physical design tools at what the company describes as mature process nodes. Independent confirmation of a full-flow place and route tapeout at sub-20 nanometer DRAM periphery using only domestic tools has not appeared in the public record as of mid-2025. The file now has a physical layout, but it is not yet a mask. Before any photomask is cut, the file must be verified. Design rule checking confirms every geometry meets the fab's physical constraints, every wire width, every spacing, every overlap. Within tolerances measured in fractions of a nanometer, layout versus schematic verification confirms the physical layout matches the intended circuit, that no wire was misconnected in the translation from logic to geometry. Parasitic extraction models the resistance and capacitance of every wire at the dimensions it will actually be manufactured, because at these scales, the wire is not an ideal conductor. It is a component with its own electrical behavior that feeds back into whether the circuit performs as intended. This is the verification node, and it is where the choke point is sharpest. Fabs do not certify verification tools casually. A false pass on design rule checking means a mask is cut for a chip that cannot function. The cost is the mask set, plus the fab run, plus the schedule slip. which at advanced nodes can mean tens of millions of dollars and months of lost time. So foundries, including SMIC and CXMT, maintain certified sign-off flows, and for most advanced nodes, those flows have been certified against Synopsys Caliber, the dominant design rule checking and layout versus schematic tool, and Cadence's equivalent suite. Certifying a new tool against a foundry's rule deck is not a software problem alone. It is a process of iterative validation that takes years and requires the foundry's active cooperation, because you are not just testing whether the algorithm is correct in principle. You're testing whether this tool, running this rule deck, on this process, produces outputs that correlate with what the manufactured silicon actually does. That correlation database is what gives the certification its legal weight inside the fab. Here is where the hypothesis I am testing across this whole map lands hardest. My hypothesis is that the electronic design automation choke point is not primarily about algorithmic complexity. It is about the ecosystem of verified rule decks, certified process design kits, and intellectual property library compatibility that has accumulated around Synopsys and Cadence over 30 years. A Chinese tool that matches the algorithm but lacks that ecosystem is like a road that is paved but has no on-ramps. The algorithm is the replicable part. The accumulated correlation database, the silicon-validated rule deck tuning built up across foundry after foundry and process generation after process generation, that is the moat. Certifying a verification tool against a foundry node is like certifying a new weighbridge for a commercial port. The instrument can be accurate. It still must be independently tested against known loads at that specific dock, retested when the dock surface changes, and its certification must be renewed when the port authority updates its standards. A new weighbridge that has not been through that cycle cannot legally clear freight, no matter how precise its engineering. Primarius Technologies, a domestic Chinese firm focused specifically on simulation and verification, has disclosed that certain Chinese fabs have run its tools on internal flows. What internal flows means in practice, whether that is qualification runs, production sign-off, or parallel verification running alongside the primary certified tool without replacing it, is not specified in the disclosures I have seen. That ambiguity is not an accident. It is where the honest boundary of the map sits. Node, physical verification, design rule checking, layout versus schematic, parasitic extraction, foundry sign-off. Status, sealed choke point, no confirmed bypass at advanced nodes. Domestic tools are in qualification at some Chinese fabs by reports, but in qualification is not in production sign-off. The gap between those two states is measured in tape-out cycles, not press releases. The line from verification carries forward into the domestic challenger node, and this is where I want to be precise in a way most coverage is not. Beijing has not ignored this map. State funding has flowed into Empyrean, Primorius, Expedic, and a cluster of smaller firms with the explicit goal of a full domestic electronic design automation flow. The question is not whether the effort is real. It is where on the flow the domestic tools have actually been proven, and where the line still terminates. Empyrean is the anchor firm, publicly listed, profitable at its reported scale, and by its own disclosures, serving a significant number of Chinese chip design companies. The tools it claims most credibly cover analog and mixed signal design, certain physical verification tasks at mature nodes, and library characterization, segments of the flow that are genuinely valuable and genuinely independent of the advanced node bottleneck. Reports from Chinese industry media, which should be read as company-friendly but not fabricated, describe Empyrean tools being used in production flows at DRAM nodes consistent with DDR4 generation geometries. That is a real accomplishment, and I do not want to dismiss it the way Western analysts reflexively do. But capable at DDR4 era geometries and capable at leading-edge logic are two different claims, and the evidence base for the second does not yet exist in the public record. Neither Empyrean nor any other domestic firm has published, and no third party has independently confirmed a complete front-to-back tape-out at an advanced logic node, say sub-7 nanometer logic or its DRAM equivalent periphery, using only domestic tools without any Cadence or Synopsys component in the certified sign-off path. I want to be precise about what that boundary means. Absence of public confirmation is not proof of absence. It is a flag on the map that says unverified. The line may exist. I cannot draw it yet. Imagine a river crossing where the main bridge is controlled by a single toll authority. The domestic effort has built a ford, passable in dry season at this width of river, with this current speed. Whether it holds when the water rises, when the load is heavier, when the crossing must happen in hours rather than days, that is what the engineers are still testing. Calling the ford a bridge before those tests complete is not confidence. It is cartographic fraud. Node, domestic electronic design automation flow. Empyrean, Primarius, full flow capability. Status, junction. China has already routed around at mature DRAM generation nodes. Choke point with a bypass under construction, unverified at the leading edge. The two statuses coexist on this map, and collapsing them into one is the error most coverage makes. The mature node bypass is real. The advanced node bypass is not yet on the map. Now we reach the node the file cannot pass. The full flow sign-off for advanced logic at leading-edge DRAM periphery and below, the complete chain from schematic capture through design rule checking and layout versus schematic sign-off. At nodes requiring multi-patterning, extreme precision in parasitic modeling, and full foundry certification, without any Synopsys or Cadence component in the certified path. This is the dead end on this map, and the rhythm here should slow down because the argument is finer than it sounds. The case that this is a permanent dead end runs as follows. The algorithmic complexity of leading-edge physical verification scales non-linearly with design rule complexity. At advanced nodes, the number of interacting design rules and the precision required for parasitic extraction are not merely harder problems. They are problems that have been tuned against real silicon over decades of certified production runs. Synopsys. Caliber is not merely a design rule checking engine. It is a design rule checking engine whose outputs have been correlated against manufactured silicon at foundry after foundry, cycle after cycle, until the foundry trusts it to the standard of a legal sign-off. A new tool starting that correlation process now faces a years-long certification runway, even if the algorithm is equivalent. And the algorithm has not been confirmed to be equivalent at these nodes. Meanwhile, the United States Export Control Framework, if maintained and expanded, restricts not just the tools, but the movement of the engineers who carry the tacit knowledge of how to build and validate them. The ecosystem moat deepens every year that the leading edge advances and the certified correlation database grows. The counter-argument is not primarily technical. It is structural. China is the world's largest chip market by consumption, and the state has committed institutional capital, not just firm-level research budgets, to closing this gap. The history of electronic design automation is not a history of permanent monopoly. Cadence itself displaced earlier incumbents, and Synopsys grew partly by acquiring and integrating tools that initially appeared marginal. More pointedly, the leading edge of DRAM is not the leading edge of logic. CXMT's roadmap, if it follows the trajectory of historical DRAM scaling, may reach nodes where domestic tools close the certification gap before those tools would need to handle the most extreme logic node complexity. The bypass may arrive at the memory-specific edge of the problem before it arrives at the full logic edge. And for a country whose stated memory chip priority is DRAM self-sufficiency, that partial bypass may be sufficient to matter strategically, even if it does not constitute full independence. The dead end is real, but it is shaped like a funnel, not a wall. The domestic tools can carry the file most of the way, and the distance between most of the way and all the way with foundry certification is shrinking. But it is not closed, and the pace of its closing depends on variables the map cannot resolve from the outside. Sustained state funding, foundry cooperation at the process generation that matters, and whether export controls tighten further around the engineers and the knowledge they carry, not just the software licenses. The map now has enough nodes drawn to read it whole. The bypassed junctions, mature node DRAM design flows, where domestic tools are documented in production-adjacent use at DDR4 generation geometries. Analog and mixed-signal front-end design, where Empyrean and others have credible commercial traction. Library characterization and certain parasitic extraction tasks at legacy nodes. Those are real rewrotes, and 2 years ago, the Western consensus did not give them enough credit. The junctions that remain closed. The process design kit format standard, where the open access-based interchange format remains the substrate of the global ecosystem, and domestic tools operate within it rather than replacing it. Physical verification sign-off certification at advanced nodes. No confirmed full-flow domestic replacement in production. Simulation and verification at leading-edge DRAM periphery and advanced logic, unverified in the public record. And the accumulated correlation database, decades of silicon-validated rule deck tuning that gives Synopsys Calibre and Cadence's suite their foundry certification status. That database is not a document you can copy. It is a relationship between tool outputs and physical reality, built one tape-out cycle at a time. My read of the whole web, China has rerouted around the mature segments of the electronic design automation dependency map faster than most Western commentary acknowledged 2 years ago. Empyrean's traction is not theater, but the leading-edge verification node, the certification sign-off that converts a layout file into a legal mask, remains the most durable choke point on this map, because it is not a technical barrier alone. It is a trust and time barrier that compounds with each new process generation. The network is not close to self-contained at the leading edge. It is meaningfully more self-contained at the mature edge than it was. Those are two different maps, and conflating them is the most common error in this analysis. That DRAM cells design file we traced from the first node. At a DDR4 generation Chinese fab, reports suggest it can travel most of its journey on domestic tools now. At a leading-edge periphery node, the control logic that will define whether Chinese DRAM competes with the next generation of production from leading memory manufacturers, the file still hits a node it cannot pass on domestic sign-off alone. The door Beijing found is real. What lies on the other side of it is still being built. The map is not complete. It is legible enough to read which junctions are open and which are not, and that is a different kind of knowledge than anyone had 5 years ago. The verification sign-off node is where I would watch next. Specifically, whether any Chinese foundry publicly certifies a domestic design rule checking tool for a sub-20 nanometer DRAM node in the next 18 months. If that happens, the map changes. If it does not, the choke point holds at the place that matters most. Which node do you think falls first, and what would it take? Leave it in the comments. And if tracing this kind of network is useful to you, the subscribe button is right there, and turning on notifications means you will see the next node when it drops.